So we learned earlier this afternoon, very, very sad news. Hockey fans in this city will remember him. Claude Lemieux, Canadian who was, by the way, on the 1986 Stanley Cup winning team. He'd won 3 Stanley Cups in his career with a couple of teams, including the New Jersey Devils. But he had been, the Canadians now have this presentation that they make every day in the playoffs. They have a former Canadians, usually a captain, I guess, coming out. They call him the torchbearer. So I think Kirk Muller's been out there. Yaroslav Halak was out there last night. Larry Robinson had done this. And then Claude Lemieux, again, a Stanley Cup winner in 1986 with the Canadians, was out there a couple of days ago. Looked fine. He was out there, held up the torch. And then we found out today, tragically, that Claude Lemieux had died at the age of 60. Now, I don't have many details to this. We did get, and again, if you're a hockey fan here, you'll remember Claude Lemieux. We're going to talk to Enrico Ciccone about this as well, because I heard a great quote. He said, everybody hated him, but everybody wanted him on their team, which I thought was such a great way to describe Claude Lemieux, such a great, talented player. But I had, earlier in the day, Sean Campbell from TSN came into the studio, and, well, we talked about it. It kind of started like this. Don't really know where to start other than 3 days ago. We saw Claude Lemieux bring out the torch at the Canadiens game against Carolina. He looked, you always be careful when you say that, he looked fine. And today we find out he died. He's 60, was 60. What more do we know about this, Sean?
Not much at all. It was about an hour ago, less than an hour ago, we were live on the air and the news breaks from the NHL alumni, and then you're a little bit lost for words because you have a vivid memory of them turning to Claude Lemieux carrying the torch, and this has been such an iconic moment. Who will carry the torch? Yeah. Who's going to be doing it? And then I think about just 2 days ago when I saw that, I was flooded with memories of Claude Lemieux, the playoff performer, and how is that going to translate to the Montreal Canadiens winning this game in overtime? And his legacy is what he did in the playoffs.
For people who don't remember, don't have that vivid memory you do, just kind of a quick background. He was with the Canadiens for 3 Stanley Cups?
He had 4 Stanley Cups, but he had, with the 86 Stanley Cup. He was with the club. He won with New Jersey and Colorado as well, later on in his career. But wherever he went on to win, and so much so that he won a Conn Smythe. This is a guy that would pick up, never the top scorer on his team, but twice in the NHL, he led the NHL in goal scoring, game-winning goals, overtime goals. But to flash to the Montreal Canadiens, it was the 86 run where he had 2 of his 3 career playoff overtime winners, including Game 7 against the Hartford Whalers in round 1. And I did a lot of radio with Chris Nyland. And Chris Nyland, who has his 1 Stanley Cup ring from 86, he goes, I would never have a Stanley Cup ring if it wasn't for Claude Lemieux, who won round 1 in Game 7 against the Hartford Whalers. He said that moment was the moment that we started to believe in a group. And he was a young rookie, and there were a lot of youngsters. That was part of the transition years for the Canadiens from those dynasty of the 70s to the early 80s. And then you had Lemieux and coming in, and Claude Lemieux was this guy that just did not give about anything.
I remember as a bit of a tough guy. You talk about him as a goal scorer, but I remember him being,
tough. Like, yes, he was tough, but he was the equivalent of the pest, the antagonizer. Yeah. He would do anything to win a hockey game, and that is part of his memory that he left. And when you had a regular season performer, and you talk about playoff performers, all-time playoff performers, you can go down the list of your Wayne Gretzky's, your Mario Lemieux's. You will say Claude Lemieux's name.
That is, as I said from earlier this afternoon, Sean Campbell from TSN 690. Enrico Ciccone did not play with Claude Lemieux, but certainly knew of him, and he's on the line. He's, of course, a Quebec Liberal MNA. Enrico, thank you so much for coming on. I heard you clipped earlier in the afternoon, and I thought what you said was so, perfectly describing the kind of a player Claude Lemieux was. You said everyone hated him, but everybody wanted him on their team.
Well, you know what? It was a great explanation. We guys had the discussion that he was in the words in the NHL we call him money player. He's the guy that would come and he would perform. He was one of for me, in my era, he was probably the best competitor that a team could have. He would show up. He would score big goals. He would hit you. He wasn't that type of the fighting guy. He wouldn't let his gloves down, but he could get you off your game with the words. He was so witty. He could come back and with a phrase that would get you off your game. And he was the prototype of of a playoff player, and everybody wanted a player like that.
It's interesting to hear you say that, right? We think of players, you look at a career and how many goals you scored, et cetera. But as you just said, it turns out in playoffs, he was your money guy in the playoffs, right? Talk about how many game-winning goals he had in playoffs, including for the Canadians back in 1986. And I think Sean made the point, Game 7 against the Hartford Whalers, if not for that, they don't win the Cup that year. He scored the winning goal.
Exactly, and not only that, but he was the type of player, there's two ways to win a game in the NHL. You can play a perfect game, which happens very, very rarely, or you can make the opponent beat themselves. And sometimes, Claude would do that. He would make the team, get off their game, and try things, and he would get guys running after him, so they would forget about the game plan, and that's the type of player he was. And there's the thing is too with Claude is that, and that's what I love about the NHL. Little stories that we can always call each other. And 2 months ago, Claude called me, because of his son he was caught in the Middle East when there was a lot of bombings in Iran, and he called me, very worried. He goes, "Chico, can you help me? Can you get my son back?" And of course, as a provincial MNA, you have contacts. So I contacted the federal side, and we went back and forth, and we would work a lot with a lot of people. We got him back, So I was talking to him about 2 months ago. I talked to his brother today, Justin, and he was so hurt. He was so hurt, and I offered him my support, and he said, "Chico, we'll need support." So if I have a message for the people of Quebec, the Lemieux family will need support for the next few weeks.
I will point out for anybody, if you want to go on social media, there's some tributes already up there, and I'm sure if you go and the family will see those, and you can pay your respects that way. I mentioned Enrico, he'd been on the ice, of course, as an ambassador with the Torch. Did you have any sense, I'm sure you've been watching all the games, any sense that anything was up?
No, you know what? These are the things that, there's a lot of rumors, I will let the team, I would let the family speak whenever they want to speak and explain what happened. But, hockey's a tough game, and we get hit a lot. We get a lot of concussions. There's a lot of problems. I don't want to speculate or anything, but there's, not because you've made a lot of money, not because you've had a great career, that after your career you don't feel pain, mentally. You don't feel pain physically. I know when I get up every morning, I feel it. And it's not, there's a lot of players that live through a lot of pain, and that's something that we go with. I don't want to get pity from anybody, but these are the things that we go through, and maybe like I said, I don't want to speculate something you might have happened with Claude, and it's too bad. It's very too bad, because when you see things like that with a great wife, great family, and surrounding friends, the Montreal Canadiens family, which is very supportive when you have problems, it's very unfortunate that things like that can happen.
Had a wife, 4 children as well. You mentioned, of course, helping out with his son. So listen, our hearts obviously go out to them today. And I said, if you want to pay your respects, you can do it by going online. There's so many posts have already come up acknowledging him and the amazing career that he had. Enrico, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on today.
Well, thanks for giving me the chance to talk about a great NHL player.
Take good care. Enrico Ciccone, former Montreal Canadiens player, now, of course, Quebec Liberal MNA for Marquette.
iHeartRadio is throwing it back.
2010s, the decade.
To the days of huge hits and unforgettable anthems. A non-stop stream of the biggest and best.
Drake, Rihanna, Beyonce, Katy, Gaga, The Weeknd,
and more. All your decade-defining favorites, all in one place.
Hi, it's Katy Perry.
Hey, it's Bruno Mars.
This is Kesha.
Find 2010's The Decade on the free iHeartRadio app. Preset the station so it's always one tap away.